Today we're looking at heavies and mediums. For me, there is typically very little difference in this game between heavies and mediums, especially when you get to Era 3. So what do I mean by that? Well, in Era 3 we have the premium medium, the EE, which when you play it ends up feeling like a heavy, and it does in fact play better than most of the heavies in Era 3 despite it being a medium. The other way around, we have the M1, tier 1 of Era 3, American, well, heavy, and that would make a solid medium. The M1 is a solid medium, or at least it would be if it weren't already classed as a heavy. This is the reason why at times it's very difficult to distinguish between what a heavy crew should be and what a medium crew should be. So my approach to heavies and mediums is to set them all up the same way, and then once I've played with this standard setup, I will adjust it depending on my playstyle in that particular vehicle. So I start off with improved ventilation, which boosts crew performance by 5%, gun rammer, which decreases the loading time by 7.5%, gun stabilizer, which improves accuracy during turret rotation and hull movement by 20%, and lastly toolbox, which reduces repair time by 30%. That's my starting point for all heavies and all mediums. Depending on the vehicle, I can adjust it, tweak it. You can obviously chop and change as you see fit. So for example, if you're in a heavy that is an excellent brawler, or you like the brawling playstyle, so we're talking about you playing tanks like the FV4-11, T-72AV, Leopard 2A5, Stritzwagen 122A, then you might want to exchange the vents for armor hardening, which will reduce incoming damage by 5%. Or if the heavy you're playing is too slow, much like the Conquerors in Era 2, then trade vents for turbocharger, or whatever it might be. So turbocharger will increase your max horsepower by 5% and boost your top speed by 5%. I recommend you guys customize as you need to, but the build I've covered focuses on maximum gun performance, and in conjunction with crew skills that we'll cover a little bit later, it also maximizes repair times, which for heavies and mediums I believe is quite important, because you don't always have to be relying on your consumable to get you out of trouble. Speaking of consumables, let's have a look at those next. So I run, on all heavies and mediums, I run enhanced repair kit, enhanced hull patch kit, and enhanced med kit. The only thing to note here is that the hull patch kit now requires you to be stationary for 30 seconds if you want the full 20% heal. If you start moving, any time you spend moving while the hull patch kit is active, the heal will drop from 20% of your full health to 10% of your full health. As soon as you stop moving, it will then jump back up to 20%. And if you take damage while the hull patch kit is active, it will just stop altogether. So you have to be very careful about where and when you use it. You can of course switch out these three depending on your playstyle, but again, this is a good starting point, and I do think that this is well suited to medium and heavy gameplay. Right, let's now lastly take a look at crew skills, and this is where the most customization comes in. As a general heavy and medium base build, I go with Born Leader, which increases the effectiveness of the crew by 5%, Rapid Aim, which increases the turret traverse speed by 10%, Snapshot, which increases accuracy during turret rotation by 10%, Run and Gun, which increases accuracy on the move by 10%, Clutch Braking, which increases hull rotation by 7.5%, Off-Road Driving, which increases handling on soft and medium terrain by 7.5%, Radio Jamming, which decreases the time the tank is spotted by 3 seconds, General Mechanic, which increases repair speed by 10%, and finally Track Mechanic, which increases track repair speed by 25%. With the toolbox equipment and these last two repair crew skills, general repair times are reduced by 40% and track repair times are reduced by 65%. And I do want to stress that reduction in track repair time can be massively important, especially when you're playing eras where autocannons are everywhere. They will track you and track you again and track you again. You can use your repair kit, but you'll just get tracked again. So having a rapid track repair time is crucial in my opinion. So this crew is a good starting place, but there is room to adapt the tanks based on their categories. When we look at mediums in this game, Era 2 and Era 3, we have cannon only mediums, cannon or ATGM mediums, cannon and ATGM mediums, cannon and autocannon mediums, or rotary cannon mediums. So that's, what's that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5 categories of just mediums in Era 2 and Era 3. Oh, and Era 1 as well. Going over heavies then, we have cannon only heavies, cannon or ATGM heavies, and lastly, and very uniquely for heavies, cannon or ATGM and autocannon heavies. That's very unique. Not many vehicles in this game have that sort of variety. MB270 is the tank I have in mind. So from a crew point of view, the build I have mentioned will work very well for cannon only vehicles. Cannon or ATGM tanks, or the combination of all three, those are the tanks that you will need to decide what you want to prioritize for crew skills. So for example, the Merkava 3, well I think all Merkavas actually, 1, 2 and 3, and the M60A2, heavies and mediums here we're talking about, they are both cannon or ATGM vehicles. You can fire ATGMs or you can fire standardized ammunition. But the Merkava will use its cannon likely in a traditional way a lot more than it will be using its ATGMs. The A2 on the other hand is primarily an ATGM tank, and you'll be switching to the heat or high explosive as and when it's necessary. So even though technically on paper these two types of tank are the same, the crew builds for each are going to have to be very, very different. The Merkava crew can be the build I've mentioned. The A2 crew will likely want to drop the gun accuracy skills and use those skill slots for other skills like armor angling, which will decrease incoming damage by 5%, and safe stowage, which will increase ammo rack durability by 25% and reduce the reload time penalty for a damaged ammo rack by 50%. And just for reference, here is my M60A2 crew. So even though you can have two tanks that technically have the same ammunition types and you could look at them and go, oh yeah, they're the same, they're not actually the same, and you'll need to customize your crews for each type of tank based on your playstyle. If you're an A2 driver and you like using the high explosive more than ATGMs, then that's going to be a very different crew build to someone who prioritizes the ATGMs. The same approach to customizing crews will need to be applied to the cannon and autocannon vehicles, and also rotary cannon mediums, the GAU 8. Vehicles such as the MB270, the GAU 8, the Brennus, the Term and the Ignis, these are all examples of tanks that will want to drop a couple of skills because they've got the autocannon. So again, the full crew build I've gone over will work, it can work, but you can afford to trade a couple of skills, like you can trade General Mechanic for Expert Gunner, for example, which will give your autocannon an increased chance to damage enemy modules by 6% when using non-high explosive ammunition, and it decreases the effect range has on rounds penetrating by 25%. And this is why I said a little bit earlier that the customization for crews is a lot more complicated than you might first think. There are so many ways to customize heavy and medium crews, but the build I've recommended will work. Generally speaking, it will work for everything. But there are so many different types of tanks, there are so many different types of playstyle for heavies and mediums. We would be here all day if we went through every single one and set up every single crew specifically for that tank. And also, not to mention, if I did that, I would be setting them up for my playstyle, which is not necessarily your playstyle. So what I suggest is go with the build that I've mentioned, the full build that I've mentioned. It's a solid place to start. And if that isn't quite working for you, tweak it in ways that will suit your approach. That's what I recommend, because what works for me might not necessarily work for you, but what I've recommended is a very solid foundation on which you can build your tanks and your crews. Okay guys, that's all I've got for this one. If you have any other suggestions on medium tanks and heavy tanks, their crew builds, their equipment, the consumables and all that, please drop your suggestions in the comments section below. Now, this is the end of the mediums and heavies crew build and equipment build section. I don't want to end the video here though, because this replay, this game, was actually a very, very good game, and I think it highlights in a very good way just how much the game has changed. So we're in the M1, which earlier I mentioned is essentially a medium, even though it's classed as a heavy. I love the M1. I have always loved the M1. It's got a very, very accurate gun. It's very, very mobile, and Era 3 has changed a lot. I really, really like what this update has done. I'm not going to go into the details of exactly what it is about this update that I like. Well, I'll go into some of the details, but not all of them. I'll cover that in a separate video. But what you're about to see here is an example of how balance has returned. We've got a weasel here, and it's no longer the tank destroyer that could just run riot. It's been balanced. It's a lot easier to spot. And yeah, you could argue I should be using armor piercing at this point, but I've really, really enjoyed playing the game since this update came out. Balance feels like it's come back to the game. I'm enjoying playing heavies again, and mediums for that matter. Not quite sure what the 490 was up to here. Popped his smoke and didn't use it, so there goes the 490 with a high explosive to the rear. Hiding behind the wreck of the 490 now to protect myself from the T-72B, which, you know, one of the last alive on his team, so he gets set on fire. Good shot there. Now we just have to chase down the weasel, which it's not as difficult as it once was. Well, it's not as difficult as it once was, especially if the weasel drives towards you, just like this. It's much easier to spot these guys. I should have been aiming these shots, and there he goes, driving into the side of the BU. Game over. There we go. That is the end of what was a spectacular game in the M1 Abrams Tier 1 of Era 3. If you guys don't have an M1, then I recommend you get one, because it's essentially, it's worse than the EE, but it's a free, it's a slightly worse free version of the EE. It's got a very good gun on it, very good mobility. Lost the 3 mark, but we're still in the 90s, so that's good. Alright guys, that is all I've got for this video. If you've enjoyed it, please leave it a like, if not a dislike. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one.